Industrialism contributed to developing imperialism as all the major powers were vying for the best of new technologies. As the Western European powers, which were the first to industrialize, used this industrialization to their advantage over the lands which they conquered, they used their industries to build better weapons and to increase the amount of goods they could make. The weapons made helped them conquer and keep control over their conquered lands. The goods created flooded colonial markets, destroying local industries and making the colonies more dependent on the empire which controlled them. As local industries fell apart, the only way colonies could sustain themselves was through the production of raw materials. For example, in India, cotton was grown for the textile industries. In England and Brazil, Malaya, and the Congo produced rubber for the making of belts and tires used in industrial machinery.
Imperialism is defined as the policy of extending the rule or authority of an empire or nation over foreign countries, or of acquiring and holding colonies and dependencies. The age of imperialism is considered to be from the 18th century to the middle of the 20th century. Many European empires expanded to Africa and Asia to gain political, cultural, and economic control. The political motives for imperialism includes the newfound love of nationalism among nations, the competition between empires for glory, hypersensitivity about status among countries, and prestige. An issue with the European empires is that the people with power and money had a voice, and the people in the lower social classes had no voice, but were forced to support the conquest of other nations. Therefore, when the decisions were not balanced, conquest could easily get out of control. The empires fought for the most control, usually with the British coming out on top. The cultural motives for imperialism include the missionary spirit of nations, Christian revival, and the stress of white man's burden. Because of social Darwinism, many thought Caucasians were their superior race and were required to control and support other races. Imperialism began with interested explorers, clergy, and businessmen, but soon gained popularity. The economic motives behind imperialism have to do with agriculture and trade. Because of the Industrial Revolution and the population explosion, the European nations were in need of raw materials Africa and Asia could provide. Having more territory creates new markets for exchanging money and making products. Also, the Europeans could use the lower races for cheap labor. The Europeans controlled the trade throughout their territory. For example, the British created the Suez Canal to make controlling trade easier. Finally, the Europeans set up dependent cash crop companies.
The British had a strong influence in India because of the British East India Company. It was a trading company that traded cotton, silk, opium, indigo dye, and tea. Most of the people they sold to were rich merchants and aristocrats. British rule started with the Sepoy Revolt. Sepoys were Muslim and Hindu soldiers who were working in the English army in India. The revolt of the Sepoys started when it got around that some of the oils they used for their guns contained animal fats from pigs and from cows, which was offensive to their culture. Even though the British had little military presence in India, those living there refused to use the guns because of the oils. This caused the British to be able to defeat India fairly easy. During the British rule, they set out to improve political, social, and materials of India. The 89-year rule brought progress to India. It helped long-term consequences too. Although Britain helped to bring back India's economy, equality for the Indians was denied.
The Berlin Conference opened on November 15, 1884. 14 countries were represented by a plethora of ambassadors. This conference was a result of confusion and tensions between the major European countries about which land they could take. The countries represented at the time included Austria-Hungary, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Great Britain, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal, Russia, Spain, Sweden, Norway, and Turkey. Of these nations, France, Germany, Great Britain, and Portugal were the major players in the conference, controlling most of colonial Africa at the time. However, not one African representative was present at the conference. At the time of the conference, mostly 80% of the continent of Africa was still under traditional and tribal control. After the conference, the newly divided states were imposed on Africa, disregarding already placed boundaries from local control. Tribes that did not like each other were soon grouped together, which would cause conflict within the state.
King Leopold II was the founder of the Congo Free State, which was a private project undertaken on his own behalf. He had help from Henry Morton Stanley, who was a Welsh journalist and an explorer that mostly traveled throughout Africa. When King Leopold II started to rule over the Congo in 1865, he and around 19,000 other men took control over the Congo territory by using rifles, cannons, and machine guns. He forced hundreds of thousands of Africans to work for labor systems, whether it was cutting wood that was needed to set fire in a steamboat boiler or as a porter for a white man's luggage. People who were victims of King Leopold II's disaster said that Africans were whipped to death, the rivers in the Congo were full of corpses, and there were many piles of severed hands. King Leopold II told officers in his army to cut off a man or a woman's hand from when they die in battle or when they need to be punished. They will cut the person's hand off, either dead or alive. One major project that Leopold wanted was wild rubber. He sent men off into the Congo forest to gather up wild rubber sap, while he kept their wives held as hostages. Many men never returned because of exhaustion. Because many men died, children production plummeted. A more deadly way the citizens died was from all the diseases. There were multiple diseases ranging from tuberculosis to sleeping sickness. Many citizens did not have immunity to such diseases, and so as a result, many people died.
During the Scramble for Africa 1800s, South Africa encountered many problems and entered into intense stress. Three groups were fighting for the land: the Zulus, the British, and the Dutch descendants, Boers. The conflicts among these ethnic groups instigated two different wars. The first war is known by the name of the Zulu War. The Zulu War was fought in 1879 between the British Empire and the Zulu people. The British went into war with the goal of eliminating the final obstacle between them and complete imperial dominance. The war resulted in victory for the British people, and the Zulu lost their independence. The war was a very bloody war, and many lives were lost. Secondly, the Boer Wars were also instigated by the South African conflicts. The Boer Wars are two separate wars fought between the British Empire and two independent Boer republics. These two republics were known as the Orange Free State and the Transvaal State. The first war of the Boer Wars was fought from 1880 to 1881. It began as a rebellion of Boer farmers who were strongly opposed to the new British rule in the Transvaal. The revolt was extremely ineffective. The second war was much more brutal than the first. It was fought from 1899 to 1902. The war involved a large number of British troops and ended with the conversion of both war republics into British colonies. The British won after open warfare that eventually turned into a long and bitter guerrilla campaign. Also, the British set up concentration camps. The colonies eventually formed the Union of South Africa. Although the British proved to be victorious, they lost many due to disease and combat.